All right, welcome back, Sebastian here. It's time for my power rankings for the 2024 F1 Grand Prix. Of course, final race of the season, which means, of course, this is the final power rankings of the year. So let's get started right away. And with number 20, let's see if we can get this right. Number 20, Valtteri Bottas. So for Bottas, very challenging final weekend in F1, presumably. Qualifying went very, very well. Qualified ninth. Out-qualified his teammate by 4.8 tenths of a second. And honestly, if you were making qualifying just for Saturday, Bottas would have been very, very high up. But unfortunately, Sunday went pretty poorly. Two separate big incidents, in which he was left with a penalty. First corner, first lap, or not first corner, first lap, but turn 6 on the first lap, contact with Perez. Again, I did think the penalty was a little bit harsh, but again, I assume the stewards have more footage than I did. So they judged that, Bottas was the driver at fault there. The second incident was definitely a lot less forgivable. Basically just locked up, massive lockup, trying to keep Magnussen behind, and just basically torpedoed right into him. In the end, it knocked him out of the race. So two big incidents there, and that really was enough in my eyes to put him in 20th. Moving up to number 19, I'm going to go with Lance Stroll. So for Stroll, he was out-qualified by his teammate Fernando Alonso by half a second. So again, really big margin in qualifying. And in the early stages of the race, it looked like he might have been able to challenge for points. He benefited quite a bit from the carnage with the Verstappen, Piastri, as also with the Perez, Bottas, where you basically had four drivers who were basically massively out of position or basically had incidents on that first lap. And again, I really felt like Stroll was not able to capitalize that. His teammate was, and Stroll ended up being the second lowest driver who actually finished the race, who didn't have like massive incidents, which Magnussen did. So Magnussen then I guess Lawson technically also was classified as he finished 90% of the race. But yeah, basically the only driver that Stroll finished ahead of on Sunday was Magnussen, who basically got torpedoed by Bottas and a driver driving in his very first Grand Prix. So pretty poor weekend overall, I thought, for Stroll. Number 18, I'm going to go with Jack Doohan. Now, perhaps it's a little bit harsh to put him 18th, but I think, again, I do think it's fair in some respects. So qualified 20th, out-qualified by his teammate by 5.5 tenths. So again, very, very big qualifying margin there. First lap in qualifying, I thought actually looked pretty close, but unfortunately just couldn't get a second lap in. And of course, last classified finisher on the road. I think he was ahead of, I believe he was ahead of Magnussen. But that being said, let's see, actually, I can just check that. Finished 15th, Magnussen finished 16th. So finished ahead of Magnussen. But again, his teammate Gasly showed that there was quite a bit of pace in that car. Unfortunately for Doohan, wasn't able to show that pace. Again, his very first Grand Prix in Formula 1, so it's to be expected. And again, I think 18th is a fair spot for him. Moving up to 17th, I'm going to go with Sergio Perez. So for Perez, qualified 10th, out-qualified by his teammate Max Verstappen by about 3 tenths of a second. So qualifying gaps actually was a little bit smaller than it's been at some recent races. And then in the race, contact with Bottas at opening lap, and that was the end of his weekend. Big question, of course, is it the end of his F1 career? Is it the end of his career at Red Bull? And those are things that as of today, as of the recording of this video, is still unclear. There's been a lot of smoke about, that Perez is going to be done at Red Bull, that Red Bull are going to basically going to buy out his contract. And yeah, we'll see what happens. They're having their shareholder meeting today. We'll see if, any more tidbits come out over the following days and seeing what happens there. But again, I don't think Perez really covered himself in glory. Of course, his race ended after the first lap, but between qualifying and, that half a lap, I can't really say much positive about his weekend. So I think 17th is a decent spot for him. Number 16, I'm going to go with Zhou Guanyu. So for Zhou, qualified 17th, out-qualified by his teammate Bottas by 4.8 tenths, and then finished 13th on the road. Very quiet Grand Prix, very Zhou-esque Grand Prix in the sense he didn't really get caught up in any incidents and just kind of finished a couple positions outside the points, which is something that he's done quite a lot in 2024. Don't think he was absolutely terrible, but don't think he was great either. And yeah, big gap in qualifying to his teammate, which is something that he had a few too many times in 2024, and I think is a big part of the reason why he's going to be off the grid next year. Number 15, I'm going to go with Franco Colapinto, qualified 19th, out-qualified by his teammate Alex Albon by 900ths of a second, so pretty close small gap in qualifying, which I think is important for him, especially given that, this last Grand Prix was his last big chance to leave a positive impression on the F1 teams in the hopes that he can maybe get a seat in 2026. So I think qualifying was decent, especially given he's still running his Franken car. Started 20th because of a gearbox penalty, and then unfortunately had a mechanical DNF, which meant that he couldn't finish the race. So I don't think terrible weekend, but I think, I couldn't really justify putting him higher than 15th. Number 14, I'm going to go with your F1 World Champion Max Verstappen, who decided to kick off 2024 or end 2024 in style, or I guess a style. Qualified 5th, out-qualified his teammate Bottas by Perez by 3/10. I thought Verstappen actually underperformed a little bit in qualifying that second run in Q3. I don't think he got the most out of the car. I think given that everyone else around him really improved, but the fact that he didn't really suggest that, again, I think there was a little bit more in the car there. In the race, of course, finished 6th. Had that first corner incident with Piastri. I think Verstappen was just a little bit too opportunistic, trying to make that overtake on the inside of Piastri. And yeah, rightfully, I think got a penalty for it. And of course, that means that you're going to have a lower spot on my power rankings. I think the recovery drive was pretty decent, got himself up to 6, which I think realistically is probably the best he could have done, maybe without that penalty. Obviously after the spin, he was down in like 10th. And then of course had the 10-second penalty. So maybe without the 10-second penalty, which he served as pit stop, perhaps he finishes 5th. Perhaps he finishes 4th. Not sure if he had the pace to catch the Mercedes, and Hamilton especially was very quick today. But still, I think a pretty poor end to what's been a very, very good season by Verstappen. Number 13, I'm going to go with Oscar Piastri, the driver he tangled with on lap 1. Now for Piastri, he qualified 2nd, out-qualified by his teammate by 0.2 of a second. So again, a bit of a gap there in qualifying. And it does seem like it's something that Piastri is going to have to work on if he wants to challenge for a world championship in the future. Given that I think the qualifying head-to-head was 20-4 in Norris's favor. The median gap itself was actually pretty small, and that that part's promising. But I do think he's going to actually have to out-qualify Norris a bit more if he wants to actually be able to consistently beat him on Sundays. And then, of course, first lap incident with Verstappen, don't think that was his fault, but unfortunately under the VSC, I believe, locked up going into turn 6 and kind of plowed into the back of Colapinto, damaging his car in the process. And again, received a 10-second penalty for that. So a bit of a sloppy move, very similar, I thought, to the Stroll-Ricardo incident from China earlier this year. So again, without that incident with Colapinto, Piastri probably still ends up in the top 10, even if he only was able to recover to a 10th place. But unfortunately, that incident definitely moved him a little bit further down the order. Number 12, I'm going to go with Kevin Magnussen. For Magnussen, qualified 15th, out-qualified by his teammate by 0.8 of a second. Had a really good start. Looked like he might have been able to challenge for some points, but unfortunately the combination of a really slow pit stop, I believe it was about 7 seconds, and as well getting torpedoed by Bottas really ruined his race. I guess one consolation prize for Magnussen, though, was that he got the fastest lap of the race. So again, that's something that he has for him as he effectively closes out his F1 career. Number 11, I'm going to go with Liam Lawson. For Lawson, qualifying went okay. Qualified 12th, out-qualified by his teammate Tsunoda by 0.5 So again, fairly small margin there, and that's exactly what Lawson needs to be doing, especially given that qualifying is seen to be his weakness. Unfortunately, didn't have a particularly strong race. Almost entirely because of factors outside of his control. He had really, really strong pace the first into the race. Unfortunately, kind of got screwed over by his pit crew, as they did not properly put one of the tires on his car, which meant he had to come back into the pits the following lap after trundling around to make sure that, making sure that the tire didn't just fall off the car. And then, of course, had some kind of brake failure right towards the end of the Grand Prix anyway. So again, unfortunate Grand Prix for Lawson. I thought he had pretty good pace, very, very close to his teammate Tsunoda. And speaking of his teammate Tsunoda, that is the driver I've put in 10th. I felt the two RB drivers, very, very similar on pace this weekend. Both of them had things outside their control that really hurt them. Qualifying was very, very close, and I think the qualifying is why I decided to put Tsunoda ahead of Lawson, given that the other mitigating factors both kind of hurt both of their races. For Tsunoda, it was the clutch issue, clutch issue / anti-stall being activated, which meant that he had an absolutely horrendous start and lost a boatload of positions there. I thought decent recovery drive, finished in 12th in the end, but still, unfortunately for him, no points. So there you go, the two RB drivers, 10th and 11th. Number 9, I'm going to go with Alex Albon. For Albon, qualified 16th, started a little bit lower, taking a gearbox penalty, but was able to move his way up the field to 11th. I thought, given where Williams been the last 4 or 5 races, I thought it was a pretty decent result for Albon. Number 8, I'm going to go with George Russell. For George Russell, qualified 7th, out-qualified his teammate by 0.2 of a second, but I think didn't have the best pace through the Grand Prix, and even got passed by his teammate, despite the fact that his teammate started 18th. Or what did he start? I believe Hamilton qualified 18th, but I think started 16th on the grid. So again, despite the fact that he had a massive grid position advantage, still got passed by his teammate in the end. So not a great race, I felt, for Russell, but still, I felt okay and good enough for my top 10. Number 7, I'm going to go with Fernando Alonso. Pretty solid race, I felt, for the Spaniard. Qualified 8th, out-qualified Stroll by half a second, and then reasonably strong pace throughout the Grand Prix and finished 9th. I was considering putting him 5th, 6th, but I felt like the drivers 5th, 6th, and 7th, all very, very close, but I in the end decided to put Alonso in 7th. Number 6, I'm going to go with Lewis Hamilton, qualified 18th. Of course, had that incident with the bollard in Q1, and again, I've been trying to do some digging to see, hypothetically, if Hamilton doesn't hit the bollard, what would have his time been, given that it was only a couple corners realistically between when he hit the bollard and when he entered the lap. Realistically, it's not going to impact his lap time too much. And again, based on what I've read on the race, the website, for example, basically their analysis basically suggests that Hamilton probably wouldn't have improved his lap time that much anyway. So likely, even if it impacted him a little bit, it still would have been very, very close for him to get out in Q1. So I've kind of hedged my bets here and said, maybe perhaps it did impact him, but I also think Hamilton didn't have a great qualifying session as well. Very, very strong recovery drive, though, gets himself up to P4. Really, really strong pace at the end of the race, but of course had a bit of a tire offset, being on the softer tire and also being on younger tires as well. So that definitely, I think, skewed things as well towards the end. But still, I thought it was a pretty good Grand Prix overall. And of course, this is his final race weekend with Mercedes. Number 5, I'm going to go with Charles Leclerc. For Leclerc, qualified 14th, started the Grand Prix 19th because of that 10-place grid penalty for component change. Out-qualified by his teammate Sainz by about 0.8, but again, not entirely representative of the pace, given that Leclerc lost his best lap in Q2 because of track limits. And you could see some of the images online where they have like the camera and it basically just goes parallel to the white line at turn 1, and you can basically see like Leclerc's like a fraction over the line. Perez and Piastri were like barely touching the line. So again, margins extremely small, and I do think, of course, on one hand, Leclerc should have not gone over track limits, or perhaps he should have set a better banker lap, but again, very, very small error there that unfortunately had big ramifications for his qualifying. That being said, recovery drive I thought was very, very good, and of course recovered to the podium, finishing in P3. The other stat I saw was that this was only the second time that someone has ever finished on the podium the second time someone's finished on the podium at Abu Dhabi after starting outside the top 10. The only other time, I believe, was Sebastian Vettel in 2012. And of course, fittingly, both of them were teammates at one point in time. All right, so number 4, I'm going to go with Pierre Gasly. Really strong Grand Prix for the Alpine driver, as he basically ended the 2024 season on an extremely strong run of form, and was a massive part of the reason why they were able to finish 6th in the Constructors' Championship. So qualified 6th, out-qualified Doohan by about 5.5 tenths, and then finished 7th in the Grand Prix, best of the rest. And it was really a two-horse race between Gasly and Hülkenberg, as Alonso was pretty far behind the pair of them. And yeah, that being said, I'll go ahead and just put Hülkenberg on the board right now. So for Hülkenberg, qualified 4th, absolutely exceptional qualifying result. Out-qualified Hülkenberg by about, or his teammate Magnussen by about 8 tenths of a second, and then came home and finished 8th in the Grand Prix. But of course, unfortunately for him, had that 3-place grid penalty for basically the shenanigans with the pit exit. And it's one of those things where, unfortunately, because of the way the pit exit is so poorly designed at Abu Dhabi, it means that basically there are some safety concerns, so they don't want drivers basically overtaking each other in that tunnel, as that would basically just lead to a red flag. But unfortunately, I understand, Hülkenberg, why Hülkenberg did what he did. If he didn't do that, he wouldn't have been able to set a lap time, and who knows where he qualifies. So it's one of those things where it's, you don't really know how much you want to hold that against the driver and how much you just say, well, it is what it is. That being said, I think Hülkenberg's qualifying lap very strong. And again, of course, starting behind Gasly, I think, the two of them had roughly equal races performance-wise, but I think the qualifying performance was enough for me to put Hülkenberg ahead of Gasly. Now, on to the final 2 drivers. Number 2, I'm going to go with Carlos Sainz, qualified 3rd. Really strong final Grand Prix for Ferrari. Again, qualified ahead of Verstappen, qualified ahead of both Mercedes, although again, with Hamilton being knocked down in Q1, that's most drivers actually qualified ahead of a Mercedes. But that being said, race I thought was really strong, finished in 2nd, and again, kept Norris honest. Never really looked like he was going to challenge for the win, but I do think that the McLaren car was probably slightly better this weekend. But at the same time, I think keeping Norris honest and, giving max attack and going 100% to try to win the Constructors' Championship, I think was also very important. I thought Sainz had a very strong final Grand Prix at Ferrari. And number 1, pretty easy decision, I think, this weekend. I've gone with your race winner, Lando Norris. Qualified on pole, took pole by 2 tenths of a second over his teammate Piastri, and then just did a really strong job of controlling the race from lights to flag. Didn't get a Grand Chelem or a hat trick or anything like that, but never really looked like there was a possibility that he was going to ever lose this race. Even kept the lead going into the first corner, which is definitely something that has become a bit of a meme this season. So there you go. Final power rankings of the 2024 F1 season. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back in the next couple of days with my reviewing both my predictions and my model predictions, as well as starting my team reviews, kind of a statistical analysis, and definitely I think a bit better than the ones I did last year. So look forward to that. And of course, if we have any kind of news around what's going on at Red Bull and who their drivers are going to be for 2025, of course, we'll be talking about that as well. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.